Deviance is an area of study in sociology that can often be misunderstood. A lot of people hear deviance and they think of bad things. A lot of people hear deviance and they might think of a Judas Priest song from 1980 that goes breaking the law, dun, dun, breaking the law, breaking the law. Okay, I'll stop with that. But deviance is not necessarily bad things or breaking the law. You see the definition of deviance there. Deviance is just any behavior, attitude, or physical appearance that is socially challenged and or condemned because it departs from the norms and expectations of some group. So deviance might be, labeled as a bad thing to some people, but deviance just as defined is anything that goes against what is normal or what is standard, what is common or accepted. When you think about deviance, you should train your mind to think about norms. We know what norms are. Norms are common, accepted ways of thinking or acting. Deviance is anything that goes against that. A protest or a demonstration could be considered deviant. Some people might not like it. Some people might agree with it. If we put on our functionalist theory hat, remember functionalist theory is all about what does something contribute to society or how does it contribute to society's function? Functionalist theory will say that, a little bit of deviance or a certain degree of deviance is needed to bring about social change. So, but, at this point in this lecture, just know that, when you think about deviance, you should think about norms because deviance is anything, any behavior, attitude, or physical appearance that departs from norms. Let's look at these three different images here. In the top left, we see a picture known as the community of saints. Very religious, you might say very pious people. In the top right, you see that's a picture of Bourbon Street, in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And then along the bottom, you see a country club. Think about the different things that might be considered deviant within each of these settings. Up on the top left in the community of saints, certainly, you know, being intoxicated, drinking too much or using foul language, being loud and, using profanity, all those things will be considered deviant. Why? They will go against the norms of that particular group. It would not be common. It would not be standard in that particular group. However, in the French Quarter of New Orleans, being intoxicated, having had too much to drink, using profanity or being loud, all of those things are going to be, fairly common in the French Quarter, especially at nighttime or especially during, a time like Mardi Gras. In fact, if you're not consuming alcohol or if you are like on the street praying in the French Quarter of New Orleans, that might be considered a little bit odd or deviant. Down in the bottom, you see a country club. There might be certain attitudes that would be considered deviant there. There might be certain manners of dress. You see everybody dressed a certain way. If I show up wearing like a ripped tank top or like a basketball jersey, that would probably be considered a little deviant because it departs from the norms of physical appearance, departs from the norms of dress. So I say all this to say what my caption there says, which is that context matters. What is deviant in one context, or context is another word for like setting. When we talk about the context, we're talking about what's going on around something. What's deviant in a nightclub at midnight is going to be very different than what's deviant from what goes on in a classroom or what goes on in a library. So context and the norms within that context define what is deviant. Social control is what prevents or what discourages deviance. Social control encourages conformity. Deviance is going against or departing from norms. Conformity means going along with or adhering to norms. So deviance is prevented or discouraged by social control. Social control occurs through different mechanisms. One mechanism of social control is what we call sanctions. A sanction is just something that is used to enforce the norms or to enforce the rules or the standards of any particular context. Um, we have positive sanctions, which is those are going to be like rewards or positive things for following along with the norms. But then we have negative sanctions. Negative sanctions are going to be punishments for deviating from the norms. In addition to positive and negative sanctions, positive being rewards, negative being punishments, sanctions can be formal or informal. A formal sanction comes from somebody in a position of authority. A formal sanction might be, if you are driving too fast, you get a speeding ticket, you have to pay a fine and go to traffic safety school. A formal sanction might come from the principal or a teacher, someone in a position of authority. An informal sanction has nothing to do with authority or the rules. An informal sanction is going to have to do with the way you're perceived. People, let me go back to that example of me deviating from the norms of traffic and driving way too fast. A formal sanction would me being given, a speeding ticket and having to pay a fine, go to traffic safety school. Maybe, if I have previous speeding tickets or the offense is bad enough, maybe my driver's license is suspended. An informal sanction would be maybe I have friends who just don't want to ride in a car with me. I developed a reputation as a dangerous driver. Informal sanctions are going to be like, negative implications upon your reputation. Nothing that comes from authority, but people perceive you to be a not so great or a dangerous or risky person to be around. Those are informal sanctions. Another mechanism of social control is surveillance. Surveillance could be someone watching you, maybe a video camera, in a certain apartment complex or outside of a store, maybe in a classroom. Surveillance gives people reason to follow the norms. Why? Because they don't want to be seen being deviant. They don't want to be seen going against those norms. Oftentimes, just the threat of surveillance is enough to prompt conformity, enough to prompt people to refrain from being deviant. We might have a surveillance camera in a convenience store or any type of store, department store, or grocery store, or any type of store. We don't know. We don't know if that surveillance camera is turned on. We don't know if that surveillance camera is working. But the mere sight, the mere awareness of a surveillance camera there will cause many people to just conform, to not go against, the norms of that particular setting. Another mechanism of social control is orders of authority. A judge tells you to do something. A judge orders you to pay a certain percentage of your income to your, former spouse for child support. A judge might give you a cease and desist order telling you to, or a judge might authorize a cease and desist order telling you to stop doing something. A teacher might tell you that you need to do this in order to follow the rules or follow the norms of the group. So of course, orders of authority, the commands of people who hold positions of power, that is a mechanism of social control. And then lastly, group pressure. You might call this peer pressure. Sometimes we call it group think. These are mechanisms that bring about social control. Maybe if everybody we might be on a bus or in a car and a certain song comes on. Everybody might really like that song. We might not like that song, but we might not say anything about it because we don't want to go against we don't want to go against popular opinion of the group. We might disagree with what people are doing, but we might go along with it. the opinions of others, the pressure that they apply on us to conform, that can be a form of social control because maybe we don't want to risk being, ostracized or ridiculed. We might just go with the flow. We might adhere to the norms simply because we don't want to be called out or we don't want to be perceived as being different. So social control ultimately, our social control consists of various things that give us reason to follow the norms. One definition of social control is the mechanisms that give us a stake in conformity. That's stake, STAKE, not STEAK. We're not talking about steaks that we eat here. A stake in conformity just means we have an incentive in conformity. We have a reason to conform. So social control, therefore, consists of various mechanisms, sanctions, be it positive or negative, formal or informal, surveillance, orders of authority, and group pressure that all give us incentives or reasons to follow the norms of a particular setting.